Hello and good evening, everyone. Um, Happy New Year. I should lead with that. I realize that I really suck at pleasantries. Like, I'm one of those people who send you a message and then realize much later, sometimes 2 hours in, that I did not go like, hi, good morning, and we've probably not spoken for 2 weeks. I, however, tend to be quite polite when dealing with my clients. I think there's the extra motivation of I'm paid to be nice or pleasant. But yeah, I digress. Um, so it's a new year, and in typical new year fashion, so many people are out here sharing about their goals. And this is me rolling my eyes. I have a very expressive face, but you'll understand why by the end of this whole conversation we are having. I imagine that you're seated there with your mugs of tea, uh, listening in on what I have to say, and that at some point you will be saying stuff back because I always replay conversations in my head after, like I'll always go like, I should have said this, I would have sounded smarter, or I should have used a more culturally appropriate example, blah, blah, blah. But I digress again. So there is these three things I'd like to talk about today. And I've written them down because I have finally accepted that I remembering everything is not necessarily a mark of intelligence or lack thereof. Like forgetting is also not a mark of intelligence, lack of intelligence. So this year, I am all about saying yes and saying no. Like it's that simple for me. Why I'm sharing this with you is because accountability, public accountability really fires me up. I was telling someone today that I have no problem with doing things and seeing them through. I'm a firstborn. I'm an African. I am a girl. But starting them, that's where ADHD brain will mess with you. So before I get on my spaghetti strand storytelling habit, I want to focus on the three things to try today. Must do better this year. Again, I'm joking, but yeah. There's a hashtag I'm using on Instagram, New Year Old Me. Why? Because this New Year New Me thing is a hashtag I used at my former place of work, which I won't mention because my boss and I left on great terms, plus I don't want to get sued. But yeah, and hashtag New Year New Me, hashtag New Month New Me was such a tagline. Hashtag Monday Motivation, hashtag Wednesday Wisdom. And I do use these hashtags, by the way, for all my eye rolling and snickering and laughing. But I also know that even then, back in 2018, 2016, I felt a certain level of, anyway, we are BSing people. Like we're actually loading them up full of crap, taking advantage of their vulnerability. But this is my personal opinion. Because there's this desperate need for people to just go out of their way and do something when the new year starts. So the first point I have highlighted, I even have titles to the things I'm talking about today because it's a new year. Facts versus lived experience. I've been spending time with my brother-in-law and we've been talking, deep things. And I was telling him, I don't understand why GDP is a mark for wealth in African countries that are predominantly, where the population is predominantly in the rural area, like 50+% is in rural area, and the backbone of the economy is agriculture. And trust me to always see colonization showing its ugly head, because my first thought was the only way in which agriculture would be defined by a white supremacist with a link to GDP is if people are growing their food to export it. And I told him, look, my understanding of success is different from what a lot of mainstream media makes success out to be. It's not just, there's financial success. So let me put it that way. There's emotional success, there's social success, there's familial success, there's marital success, etc. And that's for parenting success. Like, hey, if your parent goals, then your kid can come and tell you they're gay. Then when something bad happens to them, you're the first person they can talk to. By the way, side note, I'm not parent shaming, because there are people whose kids have not been able to come to them with their issues because they're struggling with their mental health, and mental health colors the way you think. I would know. Depression can blow up the way you feel to a point where you think, I'm the only one going through this, or I can't go tell my mom I want to hurt myself, or how would she deal with these feelings, etc. But let's go back to facts and lived experience. The different kinds of success. We focus so much on financial success, and now it's starting to show. The ugly underbelly, like the soft underbelly of focusing on being tough and showing up for work, and this toxic positivity of, there's a line, your worst experiences make you stronger. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I hate those lines. Have I told you I hate those lines? And this is why I hate these phrases, because they try and over romanticize pain, making lemons out of lemonade, which is a line I literally just used on Instagram. But no one tells you how ugly it is. We recently had a discussion with my girlfriends. We have a WhatsApp group, my Kenyan girlfriends, people I've grown up with from childhood, like 7th grade. And we're talking about a Black female figure who has shared her journey as an entrepreneur and how it's completely messed with her mental health, messed with her finances. Like literally, she was in debt. She was trying to market this product. She didn't have photographers. She was experiencing, of course, racism. As a Black woman looking for office space, people are like, I don't think I'm ready to give you my space. And it's nuanced, but it's also in your face in some cases where people are like, no, I'd never give a person like you a space. But this is someone's lived experience versus facts. Now, I'm a scientist and I know how big people are on facts. So while I was spending time on the Instagram streets today, I noticed that a certain female doctor was shamed by a male doctor. Thankfully, they're of the same race. They're both white. About not using the everyday protocol for diagnosing something. So in this particular case, they were talking about hypothyroidism. And I was so triggered, and this is why. Very many women have gone to hospital describing symptoms and have been told versions of it's in your head. I call it medical incompetence. I call it medical gaslighting. And this is why. When you have certain people get into the medical field because they want to have the title doctor, or because I come from a long line of doctors, or I made the grade, and this is a fit for me because I made the grade. Not because they're interested in serving humanity, not because they're interested in doing anything to help the sick or suffering, not because they have the heart of Jesus. No. Those are not their motivations. They've never been empaths. No, they're probably like complete idiots who've always bullied people and blah, 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 and have issues, but they decide they get into medicine. Let me tell you how this shows. And I'm waiting for someone to tell me, where are the stats on this? Please come at me. So you find these are the doctors who tell women, myself included, when they show up with period pain, that surely it can't be that bad. Childbirth is worse, says the person who has no vagina and no uterus, who will never experience childbearing. Minimizing your pain. Secondly, dismissing you. You go there saying you have symptoms, and literally you present with actual symptoms. You have constipation, you have unexplained weight gain. My partner is happy, I can hear him laugh. You have unexplained weight gain. And they, oh my goodness, let's not even start with the fat shaming. Another thing that doctors do a lot of is the minute they see that you have weight and you complain about anything, they will make it about the weight. So we were talking about hypothyroidism, and very many women have shared how they've gone to hospital complaining about this symptom and that symptom, and their mood is low and they're tired. And you know what they're told? Exercise, get some sun, do this, do that. And yet, while this doctor was testing for TSH, your thyroid stimulating hormone, they did not, for instance, think, or if it crossed their mind, they didn't want to be bothered to tell you, how about we test for T3 and T4? We just see whether the signal is being sent from your brain for your thyroid to do something, but whether it's actually being done. And I don't even want to get into the technicalities. It's also how when women go complaining about certain things related to our reproductive health, um, it's very hard for doctors to catch PCOS. And yet, sometimes this patient literally comes with a checklist of symptoms telling you, and I know women to be meticulous when they're suffering. They'll tell you, this is what is happening. I'm gaining weight. I'm thirsty. I'm tired all the time. My hair is falling out. I'm anxious. My heart is racing. I can hear it in my head. And you're told, you know what, because of your weight, because of this, because of that, and no one pays attention until you come back with Hashimoto's. No one is even checking to see whether your body's immune response is hyperactive because there's something else going on. No one is checking. And in my case, no one is telling you, outside of the thick endometrial lining you have, the thick uterine lining that you have, the only thing that my OBGYN at the time thought to tell me, he's a man, an African man, was that I was very fertile. He did not, in all that he was telling me about how I don't have cysts and wondering how I was 32 years old and I didn't have cysts and I didn't have fibroids and I had never had a child. And I was asking about how to get rid of my uterus / do something permanent because I had no interest in having children. And he was aghast, like, no, considering how fertile you were, do you know how many women want to have kids? This is akin to telling someone, a child, to clear their plate because their children starving in Turkana or dying of hunger in another part of the world. And then kids stop learning how to listen to their bodies when they are full, or they master the art of continuing to eat even when they are full. And then this persists into their teen years, and then it persists into their adulthood, and then they struggle with their weight. And then we start labeling things like emotional eating. I'm like, we are human beings. We eat, and it's tied to our emotions. We are social beings. Africans celebrate everything with song and dance and a meal. You show up at someone's house, it's a mug of chai. It's come, have tea and bread with us. When people die, that's what we show up with to comfort the family. We cook for them. We make sure they have food in the fridge because we are thinking you surely do not have the strength to cook for yourself. So when were we not emotional eaters? At infancy, we were breastfeeding. As children, when we were sick, our mothers, our aunts, our cousins, our dads would feed us with the things we like, the soft, mushy matoke or mashed potato. And when was food not part of our story? So even the emotional eating concept is very Western. Why? It removes the idea of food just being part of your life, being part of your culture. But again, I digress, because what were we talking about? Facts versus lived experience. And I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot about how we practice healthcare. I'm learning a lot about why Black people need Black teachers, why Black people need critical race theory, and why Black people need Black therapists. Because there is nothing as beautiful as being seen and heard when you show up in a room to be very vulnerable and you're doing inner child healing work. Now, if someone is culturally incompetent and they're telling you to cut off your parent, and cutting off your parent will mean suffering because your father will now not send you money because you're not talking to your mother, so you have no school fees. And it means that aunt of yours who you really like and have loved since you were in, I don't know, the second grade, now thinks you're an ill-behaved child and they don't talk to you, and you're losing your whole support system because you cut off your mother. People don't understand that is where cultural incompetence comes to bite you in the ass. Because then you're wondering, why is it that this patient is not making progress? Why are they sabotaging their behavior? Why are they going back to that abusive person? And I ask people, when you're telling a woman to leave her husband with 4, 5, 6 children, even 2, in this economy, because he's not treating her right, are you going to house her? When you're telling people things like what? I'm trying to remember some of the crazy things I've heard them say. When we tell people, homeschool your kids, stay home and take care of your children, that's the best heritage. And I hear this amongst conservative Christian groups. And you're not telling them to also look at their finances and see if the partner who goes out to work dies or leaves, what happens to these children? What do they eat? Peace, love, and unity. What do you, as the adult in this relationship, do if you don't have any skills to help you stand if you lose your spouse? Facts versus lived experience will continue, part 2, because this can go on and on. Now, secondly, Christianity versus other religious thoughts, groups, teachings. This is a personal favorite because I happen to be a Christian and I agree we can be a bigoted bunch of fools because very few of us do our own research. Now, I love Christianity. I identify as Christian. I have a big mouth on me. I am loud and proud. However, I have a problem with a group of Christians that's very big on teaching about Jesus and doing nothing to help people. The ones the Bible says like to tell people keep warm and well fed. That's an actual verse in the New Testament where you're very quick to preach to people, but you will not do any of the hard work. You'll not avail your home for them to come stay a night because you don't want to taint your house. And trust me, you may have problems. I mean, I would have problems with hosting someone who's spent the night in prison, and we all are allowed our reservation. We all are allowed to choose what we choose. However, this is the thing I also ask my fellow Christians. Why is there such a dissonance? Why is there such a disconnect between what we teach and what we do? Why are we so homophobic? Why are we so nasty about women's bodies? Especially that. And as a woman, I find that particularly disturbing. I watched a Twitter video on Twitter, yes, where someone, male, African, was saying that certain people couldn't come into the church if they did not belong to that church. And I thought to myself, surely someone's going to say something. And as the video proceeds, he says, if you're not this and this religious group, don't come in here. Why? Because the women were not decent at the wedding. They were not dressed to his liking or to his preference. And by the way, I do understand as a conservative Christian that there's a place for everything. You know, I will not wear a short skirt to my church and I'll not wear a short skirt to anyone's church. Even during winter, I struggle with going to church in pants because I did not grow up going to church in pants. Women wore long dresses, flowing dresses, so that we would not cause our brothers to stumble. But this is where it becomes problematic. When now men get on pulpits and start telling us how to dress. The sermons start focusing on that. They start telling women to stop wearing weaves. This also goes back to facts versus lived experience. If you don't have my hair texture, who are you to tell me what to do with it? If you don't grow out your hair, if the hair is not on your head. And by the way, I'm not even big on church bashing for no reason, because I have been on a Bible study group where I told people, please don't normalize this complaining about why we treat pastors with reverence. For starters, how many of you go to a restaurant and eat and you leave without paying? Raise your hand. Of course, even if you do, you will not tell me, right? Because we're in a Bible study group. Then why do we feel comfortable about going to church, listening to a powerful sermon, and not returning tithe and offering? That's why our pastors get their salaries. I don't belong to one of those churches where pastors buy helicopters and Range Rovers while the congregation trails on foot to their homes in slums. I really am proud to say that our church has an organized system of collecting tithes and offering all around the world. It goes to a pot, and pastors are paid salaries with health benefits and education benefits for them and their children. This much I know. And that's where being a scientist and a Christian comes in. Because Christians, please, let's think. When people come to you with Bible verses that are very selective, a woman should be submitted. You know, a man has actually told me that. He had not even started dating me. He was just hitting on me and said, no, but you'll have to change your faith because a woman must be submissive. And I told him, which Bible says that? You think you're quoting from Ephesians, but which Bible are you using? What version? Because it is women are supposed to be submissive unto their own husbands. And men and women are called to be submissive one to another, one. And two, the one that no one likes to talk about. Men are called, the men who marry, they are called to love their wives as Christ loved the church and gave his life for her. This is me pausing for effect. If there's any man watching this, when is the last time you made a life-altering sacrifice for the woman you call your wife, for the woman who bore your children, for the woman who cares for your mother when you're off traveling or off going to work? Which Jesus lives in you when you ask a woman what she's bringing to the table and you know half the reason why your blood pressure is under control is because of how she's cooking for you. Because you no longer eat tea and bread and eggs 6 times a week. How many of us have actually sat down and said, quite frankly, if it were not for my partner, I would not be where I am financially. I would not be where I am socially. I'd not have the job that I have. I'd not have the health that I have. No. We don't submit one to another. And that is why no one wants to have a Christian marriage. I will tell you from experience. The bickering, the gossip, the hatred, the homophobia, and the secrecy, and the women telling us, the older women telling us to have secret accounts and not telling our husbands about those things. And the men attending Bible study fellowship and all these other Bible study groups and still having affairs with women from the same Bible study groups or somewhere around there, just with their eyes wide shut. Those are the things I have a problem with. Oh, by the way, this is not me saying I am perfect. It's not really. Yeah, it's living with a man who's not my husband. And for that reason, I've told people I cannot step on a pulpit. But I also really try. Hey, Sharon tries. I try. I try to be nice to people. I try to be respectful. And when I cross a line, I apologize. I don't use Christianity to make people feel like trash. I may not condone what I label as poor behavior, but I have friends in the LGBT community who I love dearly, especially because they're so clear on boundaries. And I love friends. I have had close friends who are atheists. And I respect them. And they respect the fact that I believe. So we don't keep mudslinging and stepping on each other's toes around the things that we hold dear, because real friends don't do that. I remember reading a joke on this where someone said, if you need the fear of hell to make you a good person, then you're really just a bad person on a leash. That stayed with me. I read it late last year. Hashtag New Year old lessons. That stayed with me. On to Christianity and other religions, we had a conversation with my brother-in-law and his dear wife, and she's a psychologist, and she has so many interesting thoughts from the field of psychology, which I am currently very fascinated by, and I have been fascinated for the past, I think, 2 years. I have been told by my clients, you really should do psychology. You're like my shrink. That's why I pay you double. I pay you for what I would have paid a health coach and what I pay for. My clients literally tell me that I'll pay you for the therapy because you're clearly helping me figure out communication with my kids and my relationship with food and my relationship with my spouse and how to advocate for myself and how to deal with my mother and how to deal with... I will only gladly take that money because if I am doing the work, I want to be paid for it. Self-advocacy is huge, and that's not something we are taught in church. Now, Christianity and other religions, there's something I'd wanted to point out in very briefly around the conversation that I'd had with my sister-in-law and her husband, and my partner was present. And we talked a lot about very many things, but one of the things I remember telling her when she told me someone she'd been learning from had said they'd read the Bible, and the argument was really I believe in getting to the root of things, because when you get to the root of a thing that's bothering you, you can uproot it so that it doesn't keep producing fruit. If you leave the root inside, then and you pull out all the leaves and the branches, fine, it looks dead for some time. It will even wither. But with time and with enough water and with enough sunlight, and what waters this beast that is this root that should have died? When we are triggered, when we get back to older habits and patterns because they're comfortable, when we re-invite people into our lives who are not good for us because we feel guilt, because especially Christian guilt, but that's a topic for another day, or because we've been shamed into accepting them. Like, surely, how can you cut off your mother or your brother? They're your sibling. Why would you do that? Then that root is still alive. And then the stem will grow, and then the leaves will come. It's literally like the 4 seasons. It's in winter, this thing looks dead. But how many plants and how many gardens look black, literally dead, until spring comes and the ice is thawing and the soil is loosening up and it's moist, and the pH of the soil starts to change and the temperatures are rising. So, microorganisms can now thrive. And then aeration, and then sunlight, and where there's sun, there's life. And this seemingly dead root comes alive as a whole plant again, and sometimes bigger than what it used to be before. That is what informs. I'm very into parables because Jesus was. I think they make sense. He was a very practical teacher, and I think myself to be a very practical teacher. And essentially, if we don't root out issues, they keep coming up. They always rear their ugly head. And I told her, my sister-in-law, I told her, look, I'm SDA. We were taught the Bible. I've read it back to back. I don't read it as consistently as I'd like to, although I've started to this year. But this one thing I remember. The children of Israel in the Old Testament were constantly screwing up on the same level, because in life, generally, lessons are repeated until they're learned. In therapy, I've learned from my first therapist that we attract our unresolved issues. And so if your dad was an alcoholic, for instance, that's the example that she gave in her video. If your dad is an alcoholic, you swear to yourself, I'll never, ever, ever date a man who drinks, even touches alcohol, you will usually find yourself with another holic, very often a workaholic. And you will still suffer the unmet needs that you suffered as a child in your romantic life. And then the other thing I've learned from another therapist is that when you're in a position of power, that's when the ugliness of your trauma shows. When you're no longer living under the mercy of parents, but now you have a partner, you guys on a level playing field. Or worse still, when you're an employer, a supervisor, when you are the one gatekeeping the doors to power, so you're a receptionist to a big office. When, what else? You're a parent, so you can bully your children the way you were bullied yourself, or they will not tell you anything because children do not have opinions. They listen to the adults in their lives. I don't negotiate with children. That's when the ugliness. Or, I know I said employer, but when you have domestic help, I let that sink in. When you have domestic help, when you have someone who is at your actual mercy, your children, domestic help, your spouse. Those are people who will show you your true colors, by the way. That's where your unresolved stuff shows up. But I digress. We were talking about Christianity and other religions. So on the one hand, I said, I'm big on rooting out issues because that's what traditional therapy psychology has taught. Ask the why, until you get to the nth why. Then deal with it. Inner child work, childhood trauma, healing, etc. Always going back to childhood. I hear brilliant people like Esther Perel asking couples in therapy, where did you learn that? When a man makes a statement like a man should provide, where did you learn that? When a woman says that I had to be a homemaker because that's what God put me on earth to do, where did you learn that? And so you're always going back to what was mirrored for you, what was set as an example for you in your childhood, because at times your brain is malleable and those are lessons that are sticking with you. Now, Christianity and other religions, Christians hate on other religions. Very quick to say that, our faith is the only one that has a very personal God who comes down to meet his people, etc. Cool. But I believe in studying to find yourself approved. Like, just don't be ignorant about things. By the time you're opening your mouth to say something about Islam, about Buddhism, or about the Sanskrit and the Gita, like, just know what you're saying. Don't say what you saw on a meme, what you heard someone, like, literally look for the actual material. And this is where we get very lazy, especially as Christians, so that when we are challenged or when we are forced to witness to people who have, as I give an example of piercings and ink all over their faces, we start to stutter. We're like, what do I say? Because at that time, you can't quote your Bible. At that time, how do you literally just deal with someone on a relational level? So, someone's happy. So, I remember saying, my sister-in-law said, look, there's also this new train of thought where people say, and especially some who have read religious books or scripture, they say, instead of focusing on the bad thing, focus on the good thing. Some people will argue that's toxic positivity. There's an element to it, with extremes, of course. Then I told her, I get that. That's very, very yin yang. There's this teaching, I know I've seen it somewhere, that we have two wolves inside of us, or two powers. And we see it even in cartoons. There's a white angel on the right side of your shoulder, and a red devil trying to whisper bad things in your ear. And then so whoever you choose, that's the person who wins. We see it in Tom and Jerry. It's your conscience. So there are very different religious groups that teach very similar ideas. Now, this is where I agree with that whole hypothesis, idea, teaching. It's true, what you feed is what grows. By beholding, one of my favorite writers, Ellen Goldwhite, said, by beholding, we become changed. I remember hearing this quote also in Criminal Minds, that as you look long into the abyss looks long into you. So it is true. Where you spend your time, bad company ruins good morals is a biblical teaching, but it's also a teaching that you'll find in other religions. Like, what you choose to spend your time doing is what you become. It starts to show itself. We talk about manifesting these days. And so if you dwell on something, if you write it down, if you focus on, building discipline and doing this, if you just keep pushing forward, you will usually grow. The universe is kind. Like, God is kind. You won't just keep trudging and failing. And we see it even in manga, and we see it in all these cartoons and animations. And it's because those are such depictions of real life where you'll push forward, you'll fail for a time, but usually the sun comes out at some point. Now, so I basically said, I'm still a big believer. So the argument was, which do you pick? Is it the beast that you feed is the one that grows, the positive? If you feed the positive and focus on what's working in your life, then that's the thing that will grow, as opposed to focusing on what's negative. I was like, cool. But that sounds very Christian-like. It has very Christian-like traits and leanings. Why? Because we're very big on, I came to Christ and my life has changed. And I asked her, for instance, my issue has always been with people who do that and they don't go back and make amends. Another biblical teaching is, if you're making a sacrifice at the altar, and this is an Old Testament teaching that I love, if you're making a sacrifice at the altar and you recall that you've offended someone, God calls you to leave your sacrifice. Go make peace with this person you offended, then come back and finish up with your sacrifice. And we hear variations of it in, God desires obedience more than he desires sacrifice. So it's essentially, he's not calling you to just struggle and suffer all the time. I don't believe in a God who's just calling people to suffer and struggle all the time. However, there is some level of perseverance that's required. Grit. And grit actually enables you to go through life. So that is why those of us who are religious believe even bad things happen for a reason. It's our way of just holding on to hope and making sense of some of the terrible, terrible things that happen in life, that there must be a lesson in this. Now, if you don't hold on to something, then what happens? In yoga, I learned how to focus on my drishti, and that's one spot that's not moving. And so when you're trying to get balance, you're trying to do the tree pose, or you're trying to do it's like a ballerina pose, let's say, I forget what it's called, and you're struggling with your balance. You know what you do? You focus on one thing that's not moving, like that thing over there, and then suddenly you're able to stand on one foot, and you're able to hold that pose. and then you're able to transition to something else. So I'm getting a reminder that my battery is running low. We've talked about Christianity and other religions, which essentially is there's a lot of overlap. And so my message essentially to Christians is calm down, do a little research, appreciate the teachings that we're getting from other places. Secondly, let's find balance between the idea that we need to learn how to work on becoming self-aware, which is rooting out the issues we struggle with, naming our pain, knowing where we learned what we learned, or things that we've normalized as this is how I usually do things. Where did you learn that? That's a very important question to ask yourself. So getting to the nth why. And also finding a balance with that yin yang. What you feed is what will grow. So do try and find some beauty in life. Keep that gratitude journal. Check up on those friends. Let them check up on you and find you once in a while, because people do get tired of looking for you and not finding you. So go out into the sun. If you can't, I remember one of my favorite social media personalities, Dr. Raquel Martin, says, if you can't take a shower or a bath during your depressive phase or during winter when you're just a mess, clean the essential areas. You're good. I tell people, when you're going through a terrible period or a terrible mental breakdown, place your mug of tea there, right next to you. So in the morning, you have something that smells nice that you're going to drink. Now, you could use a thermal mug. People who can't stand to drink anything hot in the morning, you have your fruit tea that's sweet. And the minute you get that sweet kick, that gets you out of bed. And there are people who will, of course, argue, but sugar first thing in the morning, shouldn't you start with lemon water? I can't do lemon water. My teeth hurt. So bare minimums, you guys. With the new year, just do bare minimums, because trust me, you do not want to keep focusing on large sweeping changes and never making progress. Now, I want to talk about one last thing very briefly, because I always go on and on with the first few things I've picked, and then there's barely any time left for the last. But because I've repeated myself on this, I don't mind taking a very short time on it. Health and wellness in the new year. I've already summed it up for you. Little changes. You need as little decision fatigue as you can afford every day you wake up. Don't aim to, if you're not a 5 a.m. person, please just stop trying. If you've tried 3 years in a row and you've even read the book, The 5 a.m. Club, and it's not coming together, and you followed the relevant pages and you just wind up feeling like a complete failure, stop. Stop. If it's not working, it's not working. If you've tried to fit into the clothes you had 5 years ago, 4 years ago, and they don't fit anymore, and you've had 2 kids, or you've not had 2 kids, it's a food baby, and you're giving yourself stress, and January is here, and you're thinking of walking to the office looking like overstuffed sausage, stop. Get new clothes. And very often I found that when you take away the pressure, things fall into place. I know that sounds underwhelming, but it's true. I told someone yesterday, she sent me a message and she said, I need to join the gym. I'm like, need, want, why? And I asked a series of whys, again, because I'm a why person, root of the problem. And I asked her, why don't you just find a form of physical activity that you enjoy near you? And I literally Googled stuff, and she's like, oh gosh, where do I find this? I'm like, no. That's where you do the research. Find a spin class. Find a Zumba class. Dance. Play basketball with your kids. Shoot hoops. Kick the ball around with your toddler. Do something that you enjoy. Start. And that's going to be the closing. With your depression, with your ADHD, with your neurodivergence of whichever color and form, in your schoolwork, because school after 30 is hard, no one wonders, in your marriage, in your romantic relationship or relationships, with your kids and the children in your care, just start. Start small, start simply, but simply start. And have a great start to the new year, because you really do need to have fun. 2022 was the absolute ghetto. We thank God we survived. Let's do better. Cheers.